In this video, we are going to talk about the denticulate ligament and dorsolateral attachments at the C1-C2 spinal segments. Here you have a close-up of these spinal segments and their relations in the vertebral canal. Now we are at the dorsal subarachnoid space. And at the ventral subarachnoid space. We dissect the strands of fibers that connect the arachnoid with the pia mater, and we identified a cord of connective tissue on the lateral aspect that corresponds with the rostral part of the denticulate ligament. Notice that it is very thick and detached from the spinal cord. Two attachments to the spinal C1-C2 segments are demonstrated. Here we point out at the exit of the second spinal nerve. And to the attachment of the more thin denticulate ligament to the dura mater. Now we are going to section the dorsal rootless of the second spinal nerve in order to identify the rostral portion of the denticulate ligament. Notice again that this ligament begins at the dura mater at the level of the foramen that connects the more cranial portion of the ventral venous plexus with the vertebral vein, and also close to the exit of the first spinal nerve. It continues caudally to have the first attachment between the pia and the dura mater between C2 and C3 becoming more thin. The dissection demonstrates the denticulate ligament at C1-C2 spinal segments inside the atlas. In this image, the red arrows point at the denticulate ligament as a connective tissue cord from the dura mater that extends caudally, becoming thinner and attached to the lateral aspect of the spinal cord. As it can be seen, it is detached from the spinal cord at C1-C2 spinal segments. Here you have images of the denticulate ligament at the cervical, dorsal image and thoracic, ventral image levels. The thick red arrow is pointing at the portion of the denticulate ligament we are studying. The last lateral extension of the denticulate ligament is located between the L5 and L6 spinal roots. Usually no more attachments are found caudal to L6 as the roots become more close to one another. These are dorsal rootless of the first spinal nerve. Here we show in red arrows the origin of the denticulate ligament. The yellow arrow is pointing at the dorsal rootless of the first spinal nerve. The yellow arrow points at the dorsal root of the first spinal nerve, and the red arrow to the origin of the rostral part of the denticulate ligament. Here is a transverse section at the level of the lateral vertebral foramen of the atlas, demonstrating the exit of the first spinal nerve, and a close-up. Now it comes a very interesting aspect. You have noticed that there were no attachments between the dura mater and the spinal cord, with the exception of two loose connections at C1, C2 spinal levels inside the atlas. So the spinal cord is not attached inside the arachnoid dura sleeve at the level where it can be damaged by the underlying dents of the axis. In order to compensate this situation, two dorsolateral fibrous attachments, 2 mm wide and 2 mm high, developed as shown by the two red arrows in this image. In the video, you can clearly identify the function of these two dorsolateral attachments as a suspensory mechanism of the spinal cord. This drawing represents the function of the cranial portion of the denticulate ligament and the dorsolateral ligaments. As the atlantoaxial joint has a high grade of mobility, the flexion movement may stretch the medullospinal segment. To limit this, the strong lateral attachment of the denticulate ligament, as shown by a dotted black arrow, acts as a restraint ligament. On the other hand, the dorsolateral ligaments support the first and second spinal segments. A third mechanism to anchor the spinal cord and meninges inside the vertebral canal are the epidural ligaments and adherences between the inner and outer layers of the dura mater at this level.